Everybody, and welcome to this Sustainalytics webinar to introduce the Global Standards Engagement. We're delighted that so many of you can join us today. I would like to extend a special note of welcome to those of you who are joining for the first time. For those of you who are unfamiliar with who we are and what we do, Sustainalytics is a responsible investment research firm providing detailed ratings, analysis, and now also engagement on material company ESG issues for institutional investors to use in their investment decision-making processes. My name is Hannah Roberts. I'm the Director of Sustainalytics Engagement Team. I'm based in Sweden, so this is an early start for me today. And I have the pleasure of being your presenter for today's webinar. I used to be the CEO of GES International, and as you're probably aware, Sustainalytics acquired GES in January, and since then we've been working hard on harmonizing and develop our product offerings in the screening and engagement areas. So building on the newly harmonized Global Standards Screening Service and its engagement overlay Global Standards Engagement, these new products provides an assessment of a company's impact on stakeholders and the extent to which a company causes, contributes, or is linked to violations on international norms, as well as the engagement dimension, which by investors can be used for compliance purposes and to manage reputational risks. The presentation will take around 30 minutes and it will be followed by questions and answers, which probably will allow us to finish the webinar a little bit before the end of the hour. So before we begin, I'd like to highlight some housekeeping issues for you. You're currently all muted and will remain so for the duration of the webinar to minimize any noise disturbances. Given this, we invite you to send any questions you might have about the presentation or engagement to us through the interactive box that you see at the bottom of the screen. It's highlighted here with number 1. Incidentally, if you have any audio problems during the webinar, you can also inform us by using this interactive box. If you want to minimize the control panel, you can quite simply do that by clicking on the arrow at the top of the panel. It's indicated by number 2 here. And finally, the webinar is being recorded and a copy of this recording will be sent to all the participants in the coming days. So what I was planning to talk today about is how we approach engagement. I will do a short recap on the Global Standards Screening Service, which is the underlying framework and tool for engagement as well. I will walk you through the Global Standards Engagement methodology, and I'll also end with some comments on how clients can take part and how we report on Global Standards Engagement. So some of the benefits of this service, and I'd like to highlight some reasons investors participate in the Global Standards Engagement, is to demonstrate a commitment as a responsible owner. It also has an impact on the long-term value creation of the investments you're holding. It's a compliance-focused approach to engagement with companies that are non-compliant then with international norms and guidelines. It helps manage your reputational risks. There's also the notion of collaboration and pool resources. We have 55 engagement clients, around 55 engagement clients today. So this is a pool of like-minded investors that you can team up with, and you can also determine on the level of involvement for these engagements. With our platform, you can also access latest updates when it comes to our engagements. It has updates on meeting minutes, email correspondence, and more. And the platform is also very good as a library, a historical library for ESG due diligence purposes, as we track. We've been tracking cases since mid-2000s. And for it's clearly also a tool which helps drive corporate change. So for each case that we develop or work on, we develop a clear change objective for the case. We measure milestones in order to show the progress of the case, and we also report on the outcomes when the case is resolved. And we have a large number of positive changes in corporate behavior that we can report on a quarterly and an annual basis. So what makes us, in our view, uniquely qualified for providing engagement is partly the fact that we've been working with this for over 25 years. So we've been developing and refining a process-driven and transparent engagement model, which is based on international norms. We also, with the acquisition of GES, have aligned ESG research, engagement, and voting services, which now means that a company or a client can work strategically with the issues from screening until voting. And we are partnering with Glass Lewis on the voting services and have in-house analysts working on the research and engagement. So with 55 clients, we have the biggest pool of engagements, assets under engagement. So at the moment, we represent more than 1.8 trillion euros across the 55 clients. We also have an important, well, important is probably the wrong word, but we have a feature which we emphasize a lot to clients, and it's that you can participate in meetings, conference calls, trips, as well as the underlying information. So each dialogue that we have with the companies involved, we report on and upload to our engagement platform, which means that it's very easy for investors to track exactly where we are in the engagement dialogues. We have case profiles where we add discussion points for the investors as well. So it's easy for clients to participate and to be assisted in their own engagement process. And the transparency aspect is also something that we think is really important, so that you as clients can follow everything on the same level as we do ourselves. We have 21 colleagues in my team working with engagement specifically, but we are also supported by more than 120 analysts in the screening and news monitoring services. As of today, we monitor and analyze a large number of companies. It's more than 22,000 companies in the universe, and we engage actively in this service on more than 500 companies globally. We're independent, which means that we don't provide investment analysis or advice, and we don't have involvements with asset managers or investment consulting. And we also believe that our service is very effective, as we do tackle relevant issues by developing best practice inspired change objectives and addressing them at the right level of operation. So our entry point is always the investor relations, and then we go to the most relevant part of the company depending on what the issue is about. So we approach engagement. So our approach to engagement is that we always develop an engagement objective that both resolves the relevant issue, meaning that the incident that has occurred needs to be solved, but also we look at improving the company's overall ESG performance, which means that going forward, we're looking at the proactive elements of the management systems, policies, and programs in order to make sure that the company won't find themselves in a similar incident again in the future. We have a constructive relationship built on two-way dialogues. This also means that companies that we engage with, if they take our advice, it's almost as if we would be free consultants to them. We have very much best practice focus. So we look at what the best companies do in this in whatever area, a human rights policy, for instance. So if a company lacks the appropriate human rights policy and not the right references, or it's maybe not signed by the top management, we can provide the companies with such examples of how it should look like and how some of the peers have done. And we find that this is a very constructive way of working with companies. Now, it's not the companies that pays us. So we engage with all the companies that are covered by the international norms breaches, according to the thresholds in the global standards screening, which I'll get back to shortly. So the service is not paid by the companies. It's a service that investors pay for. There's clear time frames for each engagement, and we also use a lot of tools. So mostly we email and have conference calls with the companies, and then we have a larger set of tools that we can bring out if that engagement process is unfruitful. We used to have more face-to-face meetings with companies than some years ago, but we have, for several reasons, moved more to conference calls. And the first and most important reason is that we always invite our clients to participate in the calls, which means that it's just easier to coordinate and fit into people's schedules if it's on conference calls. And we also send out a weekly email to our clients informing them about upcoming meetings and who to contact to sign up for those. But we also see that it's cost and time efficient to have conference calls, and we also believe it's good for the environment to fly less. However, we do have face-to-face meetings, and we also have a number of engagement field trips on an annual basis where we invite clients to participate in those meetings and trips. So our engagement team consists of around 20 members, and we are located in Europe and we're located in North America. Clients that are subscribing to Global Standards Engagement can access these client engagement managers through our client platform. So each case provides the contact details for the person in charge, and there's always a possibility to reach out to the engagement manager responsible for a case and ask follow-up questions on the engagement. So if I shortly just want to, for those of you who might not be so familiar with it, the global standard screening, the reason I'm referring to this is that this is the underlying research product that engagement is based upon. And as 31st of May, we harmonized the previous Sustainalytics Global Compact compliance screening with the GES Global Ethical Standard screening, which means that we think that we have created a leading norms-based research product that now builds on the strength of both organizations and frameworks. We hope that this new service, the standard screening, will better serve investors' need for assessing companies against evolving interpretation of international norms. And we also think that we've set a new market standard for research when it comes to compliance. The screening product moves beyond Global Compact, so we look at different frameworks. We always take the basis in the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact, but we do have a large number of conventions and norms that we also link to these 10 principles when we report on them. 2 additional important frameworks are the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises, but also the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. And for each case, we list which guidelines and principles are breached. So this is the underlying basis for the engagement process as well. And if we quickly just look at some of the key features of the screening, but that also affect the engagement, is that the scope looks at 4 areas. It's human rights, labor rights, environment, and business ethics. It assesses companies on 3 levels, so either it's compliant, watch listed, or non-compliant. And in order to, if there has been an incident and the company moves from compliant to either watch list or non-compliant, there is always a committee of senior representatives within the Sustainalytics organization that approves these assessments and quality assures them. Companies are also monitored on an ongoing basis, but reported on a quarterly basis. And as with the engagement service, we cover the same number of issuers. And my last focus on the screening framework is to show what are the different aspects in the framework. So the first thing we would look at is the severity of the impact, the company responsibility, and the company management. So when it comes to severity, we look at the scale, how many injuries has it been in this incident, for instance? What is the scope? How many have been affected by this incident? And is it irremediable? I'm sorry, this is a difficult word for me. Irremediability. So can we restore the situation easily, or can the company restore the situation easily or not? When it comes to company responsibility, we look at the accountability. So is it the company? To what extent does the company cause, contribute, or directly link? Is directly linked to the impact? Is it the exceptional ability is to understand what degree does this incident stand out compared to other companies in the sector? And the systemic nature looks at how is there a pattern of recurring incidents, or is it a one-off? How long does the incident continue, and so on? And finally, when we look at the company, or when the screening product looks at the company management, one looks at company response, like how does the company address the issues, and management systems looks at the policies and management systems in place to address the issue. And then the last feature that we look at, or that the team looks at, is the implementation of the policy. So this all is then the basis of the engagement product. And with this slide, I'm trying to put together the two services in order to show how they are interlinked. One important feature is that these are two different teams working on the screening product and the engagement product internally at Sustainalytics. But it is the same incident the two teams are looking at. So first, when the incident happens, if you look at the left of this slide, there is this is picked up by the Sustainalytics controversies service, which means that we monitor, I think, 55,000 different media outlets on a daily basis, and we pick up incidents. And these are assessed in a severity categorization, and that information is then pushed on to the global standard screening team and engagement team, who then looks at the same incidents and assesses these for the norms breach purposes. So what happens is that for both teams, there is an immediate investigation, which is a desktop research on what has happened, but also a fact-finding dialogue with the company. And when relevant, we also reach out to the sources of the information. So it could be trade unions, it could be NGOs, it could be journalists that bring forward information, and we would then assess it and look at it. And for 3 to 6 months, this would, for the engagement service, become an evaluate case. And if we find out that the incident is not severe enough, we would just move to archive it off within these 3 to 6 months, and it would remain as compliant in the screening service. However, if the incident is deemed severe or systematic, it would go through the screening service. It would move to become watch list or non-compliant, and in the engagement product, we would downgrade it to an engage case. And the link between the screening service and the engagement service means that for any company that is put on the watch list or the non-compliant list, we would open an engage case and engage with the company. There are some few instances where we would change the engagement status to disengage, and I'll get back to that shortly. And when an engage case is finalized and concluded, we we consider it resolved. So for the Global Standards Engagement product, we immediately open an evaluate case, and this information would be accessible in our engagement forum platform. So clients can see information quickly when something has happened, and our initial attempts to outreach with the company, and then within 3 to 6 months there would be an assessment. If this is a severe issue, then it would become an engaged case or an archived case. So our engagement status is either evaluate, engage, or disengage. And evaluate is, as I said, the fact-finding phase where we assess the severity. We clarify actions that are taken by the company to mitigate the incidents, but we also, the purpose of this fact-finding phase is to make sure that we understand that the incident, if it's severe enough, are there any shortcomings that the company should address? So what is the engagement potential of this case? And then when we downgrade it to engage, it means that we see that there is a need to change. So the dialogue is actually aiming to affect this change at companies, and we always develop a change objective to make sure that we know exactly what we want the company to do. Sometimes, so in the engage case, we also measure progress and response. So response meaning how the company responds to our engagement efforts, and progress meaning how the issue at hand is developing. Excuse me. So this is measured on a 5-graded scale. And we continuously measure this and report this to our clients in the platform, but also in our quarterly reports. So what it also means is that when we see that if a company is on the lower end of these gradings, so none or poor, on both progress and response, we call them low performers. And if a company gets on the low performance list, we have a methodology of increasing our engagement efforts to try to get the companies involved in the discussion again. So what happens is that we increase our efforts by looking at if the company is non-responsive on the investor relations side. Is there anyone else we can go to? Can we find other addresses? Can we write a letter to the board? If the company is non-responsive to the progress of the issue, we can highlight the importance from investors. So we can, for instance, write an investor collaborative letter. We can turn to the AGM. So there are many other tools that we can implement and that we try to make the company get back into a good engagement dialogue. But after 2 years of low performance, we also see that at some point you need to say that this is not working, and therefore we can then change the status to disengage. And there's also, so this is quite a small number of companies that are on the disengaged list because of low performance, but we also have a number of companies on this list because of the business idea. And that means it's primarily weapons companies, meaning that if a company is involved in cluster munitions or inhumane weapons, we don't think an engagement process is going to help. So we keep them on the disengaged list. And that means it's a very low burner engagement. We contact the companies twice a year to make sure that they haven't changed their approach or if they've changed the staff, so that we can see if there's a potential to restart the engagement process. Of the 300 to 400 companies that we're actively engaging on at the moment, I think we have around 40 companies on the disengaged list, so it's quite a small number of companies. So the process, to summarize the process, there's an incident, and this will lead to some due diligence from our side on looking at the company's non-financial business conduct issues. We look at what can be improved in this issue, And as soon as we have an engaged case, we set out to implement this case with a clear process. We set up a change objective. We define what best practice looks like in this issue. We look at other cases that we've been working with in similar issues so we can understand the time frame around this. And then we start engaging. And as I previously mentioned, we always welcome clients to participate in this, and we feedback and involve our clients as much as we can through our engagement forum. So we also, in order for you to be able to see where we are in the process with the engagement, we have developed 5 milestones that we measure each engaged case on. So 1 and 2 are, of course, the easy ones to tick off. The initial communication is sent to the company and this dialogue is established. So these 2 first steps normally happen quite quickly. Then the company commits to address the issues, and the 2 last ones are about developing the strategy to address the issue. And number 5 is that the company is at advanced stages of implementation of the strategy. And this is normally where an engaged case would take the longest time, because of course, depending on the size of the issue, but if it's a training program that needs to be developed on, for instance, corruption, and there needs to be a policy development, there's training, there's reporting, some of these cases take 3 to 5 years before we've before the companies managed to implement. So that's where the most of the time takes. But it also, we believe, gives clients an input on where the case is heading. So this is a good signal to understand where the case is heading and where the company is. So in 2018, we engaged on 280 companies on 100 more issues. And as you can see on the map, there were the size of the rings shows where the cases have been. 139 of them were engaged cases and 244 were evaluate cases. So an example could be Walmart. This is one of our long-standing cases, actually. It's from 2006. And of course, Walmart has been frequently criticized over many years for recurring labor rights violations, in discrimination of women and ethnic minorities. They've breached local labor laws, anti-union behavior, etc. And from 2006, we really tried to engage with them, but we found that there was a persistent low performance and poor responsiveness over several years, and also due to the systematic nature of the incidents and the fact that we were continuously receiving reports on Walmart breaching in violation of different of these aspects in different parts of the business and in different parts of the world. We in 2014 recommended disengagement, and that then led to, in 2016, the company then announced that they were taking several measures and acknowledging its responsibility. So in 2017, we organized a collaborative investor letter, and we had a constructive conference call. And as of May 2017, the company is back into the engaged list. And now we see that there has been some quite positive outcomes. Walmart issued a human rights statement that is based on international norms and elaborated on this in a conference call with us recently. There's been concrete measures that have been implemented, including due diligence processes covering both risks and impacts, but also a thorough grievance mechanism, tailored training, and increased cooperation with external stakeholders. And there's today a clear internal buy-in and integration across functions. And as you can see, we've had quite a number of contacts with the company and a number of conference calls and 1 meeting in person throughout the years. So this is what I had intended to talk about when it comes to the framework around engagement. And I'd just like to finalize before we take questions on the possibilities for clients to participate and our reporting. So, as mentioned previously, we do try to get clients as involved, well, we invite clients to be as involved as they want to. And there are many opportunities to join in meetings, signing letters, and especially our engagement trips I would like to highlight, because we try to arrange them to go to areas or to look at issues that are specifically tricky or where there might be systemic issues that needs to be covered. So recently we were in the Ivory Coast, but we've been in Burma, in the occupied Palestinian territories. We are going to Italy in October to look at the tomato supply chain issues. So there's a number of interesting investor field trips that is also included in this service. And in order to emphasize or to enable client participation, but also clients' own engagement, we've developed in the case profiles extensive information on what questions to discuss with companies, etc. When it comes to delivery channels, we have online reporting through the engagement forum. So after the acquisition in January, we've been working really hard on integrating the products and services, and the next step and the engagement forum is the platform that we had at GES, and this of course is to be integrated into the global access, which is planned for Q1 next year. So at the moment it's a separate platform, but it will be integrated into the Sustainalytics global access. But we can also provide engagement through data services like the API feeds. We have an offline Excel report, which is delivered on a quarterly basis alongside the global standards screening service. And as mentioned, one can also have on-screen and PDF reports. We have, finally, I can inform you about, we have the engagement reporting, which is also a PDF that we send out on a quarterly basis. And here we provide an engagement brief on the biggest changes that have happened during the year, during the quarter, which means that if we've resolved any cases, we would give you an article about that, so that clients can understand what we've done to resolve the case, but also if we have new cases, we would describe those. And then we have a list of all the changes since the last report, so it's easy to track developments of the cases. And on an annual basis, we summarize the case for the whole year, and we also develop statistics that could be used towards PRI reporting in this area. So that's the presentation that I was planning to do, and now there's an opportunity to ask questions. So I'm just going to look in the questions. Please feel free to write any questions you might have. We also, like I say, we held this seminar yesterday for European investors, and some of the questions we got there was, which I think could be of interest for you as well, was the first one was, do you engage at board level? And the answer to that is that we do when needed, and we do it for especially corporate governance issues. But otherwise, we always start with investor relations, as we believe engagement is most effective if the dialogue is with the people in the company that are involved daily with the issue at hand. So if an engagement focuses on workplace accidents and fatalities, we would talk to the Director of Health and Safety. And in such instances, we don't think it's very productive to go directly to the board. I can see a question here. Do you align engagements with the SDGs? And we do recognize the growing importance of SDGs, and in the case profiles we align each case to the relevant SDGs, so that clients can see the link between engagement and specific SDG goals. Another question here is, can clients influence the selection of engagement companies? And the answer is no, not in this service. So we have another engagement service called Stewardship and Risk, which is a more proactive theme-based engagement. And there, of course, there's a different selection process. When it comes to global standards engagement, it's the breaches of international conventions and standards that actually determine the selection of companies. So it's the news monitoring process and the screening process that determines what cases potentially could be on the list. And then, of course, we do the engagement analysis to make sure the severity and the potential to engage on this. How long are companies on the watch list if they have undertaken all expected steps to avoid further incidents? Now, I think there is there's a different process for the screening product and there's a different process for the engagement product. So cases will be seen in the engagement forum quicker when incidents occur. So we start up an evaluate case in the engagement forum that clients can follow as soon as we've had the first assessment, which means that it's shown quicker in the engagement forum than on the quarterly screening results. And it also means that at the end of the lifespan of an engaged case, we could see that engagement, when we've met the engagement objective, the change objective, we would close the case from an engagement perspective, whereas the screening product has a different threshold, not threshold, but a different set of guidelines on when to take the company off the list. So this is, the two services were developed and launched in May, so it's still very early days, but we do see that there will be differences in onboarding and offboarding the companies from the different lists. How long would engagement continue before Sustainalytics disengages? So we always try to engage, and there will be some time where we're attempting to engage before the company comes on the low performance list. When it is on the low performance list, we keep it there for 2 years before, and as I said, increase our efforts to try to get the company into the engagement process. And after 2 years, we would then recommend, or we would then change the engagement status to disengage. So it's 2 years, and then of course twice a year we try to get the company back into the engagement pool. A question from yesterday was, can the company initiate engagement with us? There are companies that want to have discussions with us, especially companies that we've had fruitful dialogues with previously. They can turn to us, but we don't, for the methodology of this service, we do not have a company initiated engagement. It's the news monitoring, controversies and screening process that initiates engagement. And here's a question: do you publish a list of companies that don't respond to engagement? Now, in the quarterly engagement report, there you will see 3 lists. And the first list is all the engaged cases, and then we have a list of all the evaluate companies, and the last list would be the disengage companies. So we do publish to our clients a list of companies that don't respond to engagement, but we don't publish this externally beyond our clients. Here's another question: how exactly do you prepare for an engagement? So we prepare if I understand the question correctly, what happens is that we pick up the incidents in the controversies, we look at them and assess them, and then we do a desktop study to figure out what has exactly happened. What are the allegations? What is the company's response to these allegations? And how far has the company gone in identifying or addressing the issues? And then we also look at other ESG related issues. Now that we're part of Sustainalytics, we could also look at the risk rating results and see how the company is performing in other areas. And then we set up a dialogue. So we already start a fact-finding dialogue with the company, but when it comes to the engagement, then we would prepare by identifying a change objective, and we will have a first meeting with the company where we express this is what we would like to do, and the company can then address those issues, and that's the starting point of the engagement. Another question is, does engagement only occur when external controversies happened? What about the case where companies are performing poorly on material risk issues? Yeah, so when it comes to the global standards engagement, it would be when external controversies happened. But we are in the process of developing actually a material risk engagement service, which is based on exactly a poorly material risk handling of the company. So that's something that we hope to be launching also very early next year. But when it comes to global standards engagement, it is all about the complying with international norms and controversies, external controversies. So that actually, I think, covers all the questions that I've received. And the time is 1:45. Yeah, 1:45, full hour. So I'm just giving it one more moment for any questions. But otherwise, I'm just showing you my contact details, because this brings us then to the end of the presentation. And I'd like to thank you for taking the time out of your workday to join this session. If there are any follow-up questions, I'd be very happy to respond to them, or your client managers, or if you can reach us, you could reach us through our website as well. And finally, as a reminder, the recording of today's session will be shared with you guys in the coming days, so please keep an eye on your inbox. Thank you everybody for joining, and have a great rest of the day.